Welcome to Leadership from the Trenches with Mike Berry and Nicole Swan.
Welcome to the second podcast of Leadership from the Trenches. I'm your host, Mike Berry, with co-host Nicole Swan, and today we are interviewing Kacey Kelley, who is a software senior architect, and Nicole is going to introduce him for us.
Yep, Kacey Kelley is a technology generalizing specialist with 20 years of experience. From Fortune 500 to genealogical research to lean manufacturing, he has delivered solutions that have saved and generated millions in revenue. He started writing code at 12 years old and finished his degree in computer science at 19. He also holds a degree in music and enjoys volunteering his time playing piano at local hospitals. Kelley, we're so excited to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and just kind of talk about leadership and different kinds of things in technology space. So it'd be interesting to see how this goes.
Great. Well, welcome, Kelley. So we always like to kind of ask people to explain kind of how they arrived to where they're at. So what got you inspired to work in the software industry, and then kind of you could give us a summary of how you arrived at a senior architect position.
Yeah, sure. So like to understand kind of like where I came in the tech space. So I in the bio, there was a mention of I started coding when I was a teenager, and then I graduated before I was even 20. I had my degree in computer science wrapped up. And so before I was even 21, I was working at a Fortune 500 company working with like UPS was the client that I was working with at the time. And so that's where I got my start. But to really understand where like the leadership comes from is we have to go back to when I was a teenager and my involvement in the music programs. Where I was very heavily involved in like marching bands, a total marching band nerd. I don't hide it. It's just real. It's part of my life. But I come from very large ensembles of 100 to 150 people in a musical group, and you run that through high school. And I was force fed like Dale Carnegie and all those techniques. But really, my exposure comes from like command and control techniques, so, like military style, like there's a director and he tells you what to do and you have to move 10 feet to the left or 10 feet to the right or play notes in certain passages. And so like I have a lot of background in control and command and control leadership techniques. And that doesn't really work necessarily in technology. It's not the same space. You can't do that. So you don't have like a music director on stage, a conductor moving their arms around and telling you how to play.
So hang on. I want to kind of capture the moment here. So you're saying that music is really kind of a command and control style of leadership.
Right. Yeah. Like, so especially in large ensembles where like you go to the symphony, the conductor comes on stage and you really are on point. You are watching them and they literally move their hands up and you have to respond within microseconds. It's a real time sequence of events, and that's why it has to be kind of command and control. It can't necessarily be these other techniques like servant leadership or some of the other techniques that are out there. And so like that's just where my roots come from. And then I of course joined technology and realized that doesn't work. You can't do that. You can't do command and control with technology professionals because this knowledge is too specialized and too much research involved in that.
Oh, very interesting. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Who have been some of your influencers in your leadership journey? Leadership is a lifelong journey, and there's always something to learn about leadership. Who have been some of your best sources and influencers of leadership?
So right, like I said, I was kind of force-fed Dale Carnegie, like how to manipulate people to get what you want out of them. How to win friends and influence people. Sorry, I always get the titles mixed up. But so like I kind of started there, and then I have a deep academic background. I have an MBA, and then I got degree in music and a degree in computer science. So like a lot of my leadership techniques kind of come more from like academics and professors and then doing performance, but also working with you, Mike. I've taken a bunch of your classes at Red Rock Research where like learned different leadership techniques, and I've applied that in the field. But also in the field, worked with a lot of great architects, definitely some strong like executive leaders over the years. I can't necessarily give you like names right off the top of my head.
Yeah. Right.
But I would say that a lot of that comes from, I would say mostly of my leadership techniques kind of come from music, like from my background in like classical music. So like I have this hard parallel in my life between like this command and control technique, and then you go into software and technology where it's like got to be servant leadership. And so like they're very contrasting. And as I've gotten older, finally I've been able to merge them and make something happen that works for me and works out well for me.
Well, I want to hear more about the servant leadership and how you apply that. What does that look like for you?
for servant leadership, I see it as kind of as just a way of like, you go into the team and I'm there to help the individuals on the team and the group collectively move toward objectives and navigating the requirements that are coming down through the pipe, whether that's user story mapping, use case, working through use cases or diagramming or any of that, just kind of helping facilitate the team to move faster and to actually execute and get things done. And so that's how I kind of view leadership, like servant leadership, is that like I'm there to help other people. And as an architect, it's a technical leadership role, which is different than like functional leadership, right? You have like managers and then you have architects, and they're two different things, right? You have functional leaders and they're setting like, here's the 2-year goal, and I can hire and fire you, and I have power and different kinds of things. But in technology leadership, it's pure, like as an architect, my job is to influence, but I have no power. I can't fire somebody. I can't reprimand them. I can't say you have to show up at 9. It's just we're there. And so it becomes more of a process of getting to know the people, building rapport with individuals, and then being able to demonstrate that I can actually do their job as well as facilitate and help. And that is one thing that is different in technology than other spaces, is that technology leaders, like technology people, respect technology leaders who can actually do the work. And so you can't take, for example, a general manager in finance and drop them on top of a technology team and expect to be able to deliver results. It's just not going to work out that way. That's and I think companies have tried it. It doesn't seem to flow too well. And so
I hear you talking about competence, and I hear you talking about trust.
Right. Yeah. So like, that's kind of what it is. Like, technical leaders have to have technical competence in order to influence the technical teams to be able to deliver the solutions. And that a lot of that comes down to software is unlike other engineering types. It's all in the abstract. It's like writing a book. It's nothing but instructions that go into a computer. I'm not putting pipes together. I'm not like looking at, chemicals or doing other kinds of engineering. And so like, if they don't know how to work a computer, like the technology people will just drag things out. They'll be like, oh, we can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. And, so the deadline is going to be 3 months from now, where it's like, but if the technology person, the leader knows, they're like, wait, we can actually do that in a month. It's not 3 months out. And they can say, this is why. And it helps, so as an architect, a lot of my job is to go in and look and be like, okay, well, we don't want to go down this path because we don't want to gold plate the product for like 3 months and make sure it's perfect before it goes to market. Right. We're just trying to get something out the door and doing a proof of concept to make sure it can meet business requirements, can meet technology requirements, can meet compliance requirements, all these kinds of things, and how to navigate that. And that's part of why you have to have like competence in the technical leadership, is that you can help people be like, oh, don't go down that path, go down to this other path, and that we can actually deliver things. Did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah. So do you ever have challenges where maybe there's a disagreement about which technology path to go down?
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely like a lot of that going on, is where, so engineer, like technology engineers, professionals, they tend to, they'll get a direction and then they'll have an idea in their head. They'll be like, I see the envision, the solution is this way. Well, there's more people than just that one individual, and it's actually a team of people. And then there's teams of teams and things like that. And so you really have to have ways to navigate that, and so when you do fight that battle, and I've had it numerous times, like I want to go down and I want to do SQL Server, and they're like, no, we should use Postgres or some other tool or whatever like that, right? Like you have to have those fights, and so what you have to do is do that like influence from the side, right? I call it sideways leadership, where it's I don't have power from above and I don't have power from below, but I have to work sideways management that way. And that's how those kind of situations I tend to fight. Like you can there's ways to do it. You can go like to the board, pros and cons, things. You can also do, you can make a democratic leadership where it's like votes on the team if it has to come down to that. And if there's still like people fighting over like, oh, I want to go down path A and we want to go down path B, you can always pull in the functional leaders to like make that happen but you never want to go, in my opinion, you never want to go down that path. You don't want to go down the command and control path, like within these technology orgs, because it's, we're all professionals and we're all, like we're all competent or should be competent in our roles. And so you don't want to have the VP come down and be like, okay, well, if you don't do it this way, you're fired, right? That's not a technique that really works. Occasionally you have to do it, but I've only seen that maybe a handful of times in my career where they've ever had to like step in and at that level, right?
So what are some ways that a technology leader can improve their competence?
So one thing is obviously to stay on top of like industry like topics and the vernacular as it changes over the years, right? And that for me, that's actually kind of a little bit of a challenge because of my background in music. Like I have a duality in my life. So like sometimes it's hard for me to stay on top of all the technology trends, which have changed so much in the last 10 years, right? The internet, of course, came out in like mid 90s, and now we are. It's like finally a 30-year-old. Like it's mature, and like the technology's really changed a lot in the last 10 years, not only just from a tools perspective, but also like architectural concepts like microservices, different data driven system designs, but you also have all these new programming paradigms, like functional programming is a really big thing now, and so like so we have to navigate, so you have to just stay on top of that. So like for me, I like to read Medium. I think Medium has really great professional articles that can keep you like on top of what's going on today, because it feels like it's articles written by professionals for professionals, and that's how I tend to get my like current up-to-date stuff.
Yeah, and I know there's like a TechCrunch also is a popular news board.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, right. So how about trust? So we talked about competence. So how about trust? How do you make connections with team members? And there's really kind of two sides. I'm a John C. Maxwell guy. I've studied a lot of his books, and he talks about leading up, and he talks about leading across or leading sideways with your peers, and then kind of leading down to any direct reports you may have. What kind of techniques have you come across that help in those areas?
So for me in my career, what I found kind of works best is I go to lunch with people. Like I like to go to lunch, and I like to sit down across eating some food and developing a rapport with somebody, right? So like, let's say you show up to a new team and you don't know them, and then you go to lunch. Well, people will say things at lunch and dinners that they'll never say in the office, right? And you can develop that rapport. You learn about, maybe they're a little bit of their personal life or their professional interests or whatever it is. And then so you start building up a rapport. And for me, I go to lunch, and then we come back from lunch, and now they can't be a jerk in the office quite as much because we now have a rapport, right? And it's not to say they are a jerk, but like if they have that kind of like, oh, I know this person. It's a real person. It's not just some guy that just came in to help like facilitate this particular project. So I have found like that to be like, for me, that's like one of the best techniques I've found is like getting out of the office, doing out of office things, and developing that rapport. And then you build that trust up that like, oh, I trusted him enough to talk about my family or, my whatever their personal interests are. And then that translates into work. And then as you talk about competence, I have to prove that I have the competence that they can trust that as well. And so like you use that double angle of technical competence plus personal interest. And that's which really works for me, I found.
Kelly, you have advanced quite a bit in your career. It looks like you've always been pushing the envelope for yourself, if that's in music or in this field. I have been, as I work with leaders, there's such a strong trend from executive down to just emerging leaders of imposter syndrome. And I'm wondering how you've experienced that with the people also on your team. Do you see that they experience that? How do you help yourself through that? And how do you help your team through that?
Oh man, imposter syndrome, it's a real thing, right? Like it's like, so for me, I got really comfortable standing in front of people doing presentations and doing that. And that kind of comes from my music background, but you still never feel like you're good enough, right? It's always like, oh, I got to be like a little bit better. But as from technology professionals, I see that a lot where they feel that they're, they're stuck in that imposter syndrome. And so what you got to do is you just got to like validate, be like, hey, you're doing awesome. You're doing great. Or, you get that positive feedback, I think is a really good technique to help with imposter syndrome. And if somebody's like, and if you can tell you can tell when somebody's getting overwhelmed, and so you can pull back and be like, hey, let's pull back a little bit, let's take a half-hour break, and then come back to this problem, and then let's focus on something smaller. So you get past that where they're getting stuck on the like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not capable of doing this. But in reality, most people are capable of doing what they're doing. If you're in that role, you were hired for it for a reason, and like you just need to like take smaller steps to get past that imposter syndrome is, I think, is what you're getting at, Nikki. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
What kind of advice do you have for any kind of young up and coming technology people on how to best build and improve their careers?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Like, I would think that one thing is that I think the softer approach tends to win people over better than the like, hey, look at me, I'm the best software architect in the world, and I know the answer. Even if you don't know the answer, I know every answer, right? And you get that. And I think part of that is imposter syndrome. Is like, there's this false front you throw ahead of that to be like, I'm perfect and my ideas are the best. But I found that with technology professionals like that's like, and you get it a lot. There's high IQ in technology, and it tends to be coupled with low EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. And so, like, as I found, so if you're coming up in the career, just remember that people are people, and they have emotions that are independent of the computer that they're working on. We work on machines, but we're humans that like work together, and you have to remember that. And I think that that's something that I like. If I had to give my best advice, remember that people are people, and just because we work with machines doesn't mean you can treat people like machines, and you need to treat them like people. And I think that'll help more in your career than any technical thing in the long run. At least that's my opinion on that.
I love that. And in your world, this just prompted a thought to me. We talk a lot about hard skills and soft skills, and you've kind of touched on that with the IQ and the EQ somewhat, that falls along those lines. When you hire, or if you are able to put your team together and choose who's there, make those decisions, how does that break down for you? Are you looking for equal parts? Do you care more about someone who's a real learner and a team player over an extraordinary set of skills that you value? How do you parse that out?
Oh, that's an issue. I actually had a conversation with somebody the other day about that, where it's and forgive the language. They were like, "Well, if you're going to be an asshole, you better be able to deliver. Like, and you can, if you can deliver, you can be an asshole. But if you're an asshole and you can't deliver, chances are it's never going to work out, right?" So if I look at it like that, the perspective is, I want somebody that I can sit down with every day, 5 days a week for the next 52 weeks, and be able to like not feel like I'm being attacked all the time, or that I'm working with an asshole. Like, a better way to say it, right? So like, I tend to balance the technical with the soft skills. I like people that are like I want to be comfortable with who I'm working with on a regular basis, and I think that there's so much more. It's more important than people realize than just pure technical skill. I definitely want somebody that can do the job. I will definitely rank technical things higher, but definitely soft skills are really high. Like, if they know how to communicate, I mean, because you get that a lot where somebody who gets in this, they're just stressed out, or they don't know how to do presentations or talking to new people, which, you'll have to look past that too. Everybody sucks at interviewing. Nobody's good at interviewing. It's hard for everybody.
Yes.
But I hope that kind of answered your question a little bit, Nikki.
Yeah. Interesting.
So Kelly, what are some examples of dynamics you've seen that have helped build a team, and then maybe contrast that with some dynamics that you've seen have poisoned a team or kind of eroded the team spirit in the tech team?
So I think I've worked on quite a few teams in my career. I think I've consulted over 30 companies in my career, like worked with them, contracts, consulting, employment, all kinds of things. And some of the best projects and teams where it's like the team works together, and we like go out and do an activity outside of the office, and we come back, and then we just like, we kind of gel and work together, and you have a good balance of that soft skills where they're like, oh, okay, well, Kelly's really good at database work, and I'm really good at the web, the front end, working with the users. And so we work out a good balance of like who does what on the team, and that tends to work out really well. Where you contrast that, where I've actually worked on, Mike, you might correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the Apollo team concept, where everybody is like best in class, world class, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm best in class, I can make my own decisions, I'm going to go do my own thing. And then the next guy's like, well, I'm best in class, and then next thing you know is like nothing's happening because we're just butting heads all the time. And I've actually worked on teams like that, and it just comes to a grinding halt to make progress on business initiatives as well as technology initiatives, right? Because like somebody might run off and be like, well, I'm going to go create 10,000 stored procedures that I didn't even know I needed, and then it's like, wow, we didn't need that kind of thing. So so I've seen it work in both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, that Apollo team concept is kind of a extension of Bruce Tuckman's model. The forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning
Yeah.
process that groups go through as they form from a group of people to become a team, and sometimes they get stuck in the storming process and never get beyond that. And that's the Apollo concept you're just describing. So, you mentioned earlier the difference between command and control leadership and servant leadership, and I know also you talked about the difference between technical leadership and functional leadership. How would a senior architect role be different from like a senior marketing role or a single sales role or something like that?
Right. So so that's interesting because like marketing, right there, like to compare that with like other business domains, it's not the same, right? In technology, the architects, where our job mostly is to deliver for not only just business value, but technical value as well. So we have to come in and we're the ones that control the technology solution, and that is like a marketing person is just out there selling ideas, right? Which it's a specialized thing. Same with finance; they're working in finance, but they don't understand that technology can't change on a dime, right? Like we've kind of conditioned the world to expect technology to be instantaneously changing all the time and perfect at all times, and that's kudos to Facebook and Twitter and Amazon and all these companies. They make it so it's perfect. Like it's up times 9, not like 8 nines, never goes down. It's always perfect. But in marketing, but in reality, you have to pull from the technical side as well and look at what's in reality. What can we do today versus what can we do in a month? What can we do in 3 months? What can we do in 6 months? Because sometimes the technology system that you have can't sustain what the business wants. The business wants to go sell a product, some features, but we can't do that in the tech because the tech doesn't support it, right? So we, as an architect, it's constantly this fight of like, what does the business want versus what can we actually do in the real world? And I think other engineering disciplines would have that same kind of problem, but in technology, it feels like it's exacerbated versus other engineerings, because we can make changes so fast, right? It's just, I can type in a couple things and then it magically works, right? And we can, and then they're like, push it into production, and then like next thing you know, it doesn't work, right? So like there's a bunch of balance there. Anyways, I hope, is that kind of where you're hoping to go with that, Mike, that question?
Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate it. And we just have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to ask you about kind of the work-life balance of being a senior technical person. What should people expect that have a career in technology when they get into a senior architect kind of role?
What's work-life balance? I don't know what that is. Yeah, no, so realistically, it's a high demand job, like software engineering, or just, and I'd say any kind of engineering in general is a high demand. Like you really do, there's an ebb and a flow in technology where like you'll push really hard, and the next thing you know, you're working 20 hours a week for like 2 weeks, and then it's 70, 80 hours a week, and then it's 20 hours a week. And and it's because you're pushing into releases, and then you're waiting for things to stabilize, and then you're pushing into releases and stabilize. So like the work-life balance becomes a little bit, it's a very tricky thing. I struggle with that a lot. I log on at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night a lot. Some people are hard. They're like 5 o'clock, I'm done, right? But if you're in a leadership role, just like if you're a vice president or a C-level or just a director or manager, occasionally you got to work after hours. That's just that's the difference between skilled and unskilled labor. Is when you're doing skilled labor, you sometimes you just got to work a lot of hours and a lot of time. And it's so like to find the balance, it's hard. Like I play piano. I go and try and volunteer and get away from the office. I try and find time to just turn all the tech off and get away from it. But that's hard. It's hard to do. And I think anybody that works in tech will struggle with that.
Can I grab one quick question that I've just been wondering about as I've listened to you talk? The tech space is so unique and specific. And I love, as I interact with leaders from, lots of different disciplines, to think about and talk about their progression in establishing their brand. You've been very successful, and there's a brand to that. When people think of you, Kelly, they think of specific things. So I'd love for you to define what that brand is, and then maybe just talk a little bit about how you have purposefully developed that and the factors that have influenced that.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Nobody's asked me that kind of question. So like, yeah, so like I had to say my personal brand. I mean, I have failures in my career. I do not hide from that. And that's something that anybody that's coming up in this career should expect. Eventually you're going to fail. And so whatever your design is or whatever it is, you're going to fail in some ways. So I failed in some ways, but to define my brand would be like, oh, Kelly's a tech data professional and a data specialist is what I do. And really it's time series data. So, and I started back, like I said, when I was 20 years old, I was doing, I was helping work with the UPS client. And so I started in heavy data systems then, and piping data around the world. That was before the internet even existed in some of these third world countries. And we were piping data into Ghana and Fiji. So I learned data very early. And so throughout my entire career, it has turned into data specialties. And I've turned into a time series data specialist. And to kind of get to your point, Nick, is I actually took like I take my music data when I play piano, I take my MIDI performances, I pipe it into a time series data, and I do analytics on my own on performances. And so I like, in terms of brand, that's how my brand is kind of how I've navigated being like, well, I'm a data professional and that's really what I do best. And when people hire me, it's like, oh, we hired Kelly because he's a data guy. We didn't hire him because he's a software guy necessarily. We hired him because he's really good with data. And I make that a point. Any company I talk to is like, well, I'm primarily data. And so, but I can work in any part of the tech stack, but that's how I define my brand. Is like I'm a time series data specialist.
That's great. Thank you.
Been a pleasure to talk to you, Kelly. We appreciate your time, and thanks for being. Let's see, this is our second podcast. Thanks for being the second podcaster for Leadership in the Trenches.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you letting me come on and talk about this stuff. I'm passionate about. I love technology, and it's cool to talk about. See how this goes. Yeah, thank you.
Very good. All righty, we'll see you all next time.